This is the Personal Finance Show.
Hi, I'm Bo Humphreys, and this is the Personal Finance Show. Before I introduce this week's guest, I want to tell you about the new book giveaway. Last month, I gave away a copy of Sean Cooper's Burn Your Mortgage. Congrats to Allison from Manitoba as the winner of a signed copy of the book. From June 15th to July 31st, 2018, I'll be running a new giveaway for 5 signed copies of the new book, Cashflow Cookbook, written by today's guest, Gord Stein. Thanks to Gord for donating 5 copies and signing all of them. So if you like the episode and want a copy of the book, just go to bohumphreys.com/giveaway and enter for a chance to win one of the books. Gord Stein wants you to build $2 million in wealth over the next 10 years. If you implement every cash flow savings idea in his book and then take that saved money and invest it over 10 years at 7%, you will have an extra $2 million. How does that sound? Okay, maybe every part of the book doesn't apply to you, but with 60 different cash flow recipes, you'll find some area of your life where you can save. The point is that wherever you're spending money in your life, you need to review that spending every so often to see that it makes sense. Are you paying $100 a month for a storage locker? What's really in there? Could you sell the stuff and invest the $100 a month instead? Do you buy your lunch every day at work for $10? That's $50 a week, $2,500 a year. If you invested $50 a week for 10 years, you would have $38,000. In 20 years, $114,000. This isn't about giving up stuff. It's about making little changes in your expenses that don't really impact your quality of life, but free up small amounts of cash flow. And if you apply these little changes to all the areas of your life, the little bits add up. Gord spent 2 years compiling the list for you and put it all in a handy guide he called the Cashflow Cookbook. He sat down with me in Toronto to tell his personal finance story.
We've got 3 children, and I always thought it was really important to teach them about money because it's a big journey for people, and a lot of parents don't take the time to really explain it to their kids.
They don't at all.
So my eldest son, Connor, he came to me one day. He was probably about 10. He said, "Dad, just so you know, I'm really tracking well against the sheet." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Dad," he goes, "the sheet." I go, what sheet? What are you talking about? He goes, "Dad, the sheet." And he pulls out this worn piece of paper, the dog-eared piece of paper, and I looked at it and the penny dropped, and I had probably sat down with him 3 years earlier. He said, "Dad, how's money work? Like, how do people save money? Why do you save money? How do you get ahead? How's it all work?"
Okay.
And he might have been 7 years old at the time. And so I said, "Okay, let's sit down, let's do a spreadsheet." So I said, "How much money do you have now?" He goes, "Well, I got $41 in my bank account." I said, "Okay, great. So how much can you save over this next year?" Anyway, we kept going with this and growing the interest and everything. We took him all the way to age 40 when he had $1 million on the sheet.
Nice.
Right? And his eyes were just wide at the time. He was maybe 7. He said, "Dad, can you print that off for me?" I said, "Sure." Anyway, he took away. I never thought anything of it. But he meticulously tracked his progress against that sheet. And, fast forward, now he's a young man. So he started working a couple of years ago in Ottawa. Doesn't buy a new car. Great earnings as a software engineer. Goes out and he buys a 3-year-old Toyota Corolla. Has it all paid off within 3 months. Doesn't get his own apartment, shares the place with someone else. Anyway, savings just keep on going. He's maxed out his TFSA. He's got his RSP covered. "Dad, I need to open a cash account." Right? And just being smart the whole way through. He's not giving up anything. He's traveled. He's done all kinds of great things. But he's been smart. He could have written Cashflow Cookbook.
He started early.
He sure did.
And you started him early. And I don't know if people think that there's a time or a certain age that you need to start this, but probably it's never too early, right?
I think that's it. And I think it's about a headspace. It's about doing a lot of things smarter. It's about taking the time to learn something about money. And if I look at what's happening with Canadians and their money, the statistics are stunning. Debt being 170%.
Yeah, I quote that one a lot, and it just seems so strange. Like, why? Like, why would you, who told you that was okay?
Yeah. Well, when I wrote the book, which just a few months ago, it was 165%.
Oh.
Latest printing, I had to update it because now it's 170%. People taking out the average car loan is now 69 months.
Man.
Right? So people just doing all of these financial things backwards. And so that was my interest and excitement in getting a book to help.
Just to break that down,
Yeah.
so because we do say that 170%, what does that actually mean? Like if we broke that down in terms of like what somebody has in terms of money in the bank versus how much they owe, is that basically it?
Well, that particular stat is how much they owe as a percentage of their annual income.
Okay.
And it excludes mortgage debt.
So so let's say somebody makes just to keep it simple, somebody
Yeah.
makes $100,000 a year. They probably have $170,000 in debt.
In debt.
The majority of Canadians, is that
Yeah,
the stat?
That's the average Canadian.
Wow.
Right?
And of course, if you make $100,000 a year, the payments on $170,000 in debt are not crazy for
Yep.
you.
Yep.
So you're just going to maintain.
Well, they can kind of fit it in the budget.
Yeah, it
right?
fits
so
in.
That's the headspace, I think. But then there was a stat, another one along these lines of that of the Canadians 55 to 64 who don't have company pensions,
Which is the
half
majority
of them,
now.
Majority.
Yeah.
Half of them only have 1 year's worth of financial resources saved for retirement.
What? So they're relying on OAS
Hope.
and CPP?
I think they're relying on hope.
Hope.
Yeah.
Like
So-
hope of what? Like the lottery?
All the way across the board. Even you look at, we talked about, my kids in university. If you look at the average student in university, there's only about half of them are there with an RESP funding their journey. So the government's handing out $7,500 per student,
Yeah.
and only half of the parents taking up that deal. Of the half who take it up, they only use 34% of that government grant money.
But they can't see the future. Is that the reason? They don't have a good outlook.
They've not looked forward. Somebody didn't have the discussion I had with my son around how to manage their finances.
Yeah.
And it's about being smart about it. It's about doing a lot of things right and setting up your finances in a way where you can take advantage of RESPs and TFSAs and all of these different things.
But people feel like they can't even. If you feel you can't save for yourself, then it's really hard to save for your kid. Or maybe that they are motivated to save for the kid because they have a kid.
Yeah. Well, I think, typical Canadian at all income levels, I'm talking about people who make 3, 4,
yeah.
500,000, they're right up to here because at that level, there's private school payments, there's nanny payments, there's BMW payments, there's, cottage maintenance. And it's really about setting up your affairs in a way at any financial level where you've got this room to invest and room to build some financial freedom.
So how did you not end up like this? Like, I'm going to take a guess. You're in the 55 to 64 range. Am I wrong?
I'm 41.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
You know,
I'm 56.
You could have got me if I wasn't 38. So, and also you've had a couple of careers already.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I'm really glad I didn't embarrass myself there.
Yeah, no worries.
But if you would have been 54, I still would have been pretty close.
That's it.
So I'm glad you're in that range, and
Yeah.
I'm not kicking myself right now. So, and you're in a situation obviously where you probably don't have to worry financially.
Mm-hmm.
So, did somebody sit down with you when you were 7?
No, no one did.
Did you have the opposite?
I probably got started reading The Wealthy Barber, like most Canadians, and that really started my head thinking a bit of a different way. Because prior to that, the idea of saving, well, what am I going to save it for? Then I'll spend it later. I didn't really get the whole idea. And when you started that book, and I really recommend people read a personal finance book a month, just pick one.
Mm-hmm.
Spend $20 a month. Everybody has $20 a month. Read a different personal finance book each month. And then you start to really understand the power of this thing. You start to understand the power of compound interest. You start to understand about how to get that money ahead of you, how to get the money working for you. And then in the end, it does the heavy lifting you don't need to.
It really does. And so if you started... So I'm saying The Wealthy Barber. Well, when would you have read it? When it came out?
I think I heard him speak. I heard Chilton
David
speak
Chilton.
when I was 20.
Yeah, it's in your
and
Was
that
it
got me
90s?
started.
Was it in the 90s, late 90s?
That'd
maybe?
be about right. Yeah,
And
late 80s.
so just to give a quick summary the key from The Wealthy Barber is pay yourself first, and 10% of your income. This is what the barber the character in the book did.
Right.
And David Chilton goes to his barber, surprised to find that his barber is a millionaire or a multimillionaire.
Yeah.
And how did you do that? Just being a barber. And as you just said, it's you start early and consistent. When you're at a later stage in your life or at the peak of your career, say, you can start to see that money making money for itself.
Well, that's right. And then if you know what you're doing, you set things up right, it just takes off and you're set. There was a nurse, 2010, a nurse who died in Canada, and she left $8 million to charity. Single nurse.
Wow.
And she just was diligent the whole way through, and away she went.
And is it because, well, how old was she at this time? Probably time of her death, maybe in her 80s?
I think she died in her 80s or whatever, but it's the power of compounding. It's about being smart with your money, about being consistent, and let the growth do the work for you.
If you look at a compound interest graph, which maybe some people have, it is at the tail end where everything just skyrockets. It's kind of crazy, and it's just unfortunate that it's so long from now that that tail end of the graph is, because everybody wants instant gratification now, right? And so it's that patience. And so Personal Finance Book a Month, great advice. And Wealthy Barber, a great one to start with, Canadian, of course. And so you were reading this, and you started working, or did you start before university, or?
Oh, I probably worked when I started working when I was about 15.
And were you okay? So were you a saver before that?
To a degree, but I didn't really get it. And I graduated. I bought a brand new car because I thought I graduated. I'll buy a brand new car.
Sure.
But then you start to see all of these lessons and how to be that much more clever, right? I just actually got rid of my last car, 262,000 kilometers.
Wow, nice.
Ran great all that period of time.
Sure.
And maybe I spent a couple thousand a year on maintenance, but I wasn't spending $500, $600, $700, $800 a month on car payments.
That's right.
And interest. So it's about making some changes, getting this money working for you. I think anyone whatsoever can start. And that was the impetus for Cashflow Cookbook, because many people said, hey, I don't have the money. It sounds like a great idea.
But
I'm right up to here. I don't have the money. The reality is they all have the money. And that was the journey in the book, was helping people to find where can that money come from.
You can find it anywhere if you want to look. Now, your background is not in finance, though.
You know what? I've always had an interest in it. So
Yeah.
I did a engineering degree initially.
Okay.
And then I did an MBA in marketing and finance. And then I got very interested in
you did an MBA in marketing
I did.
and finance.
I
Well,
did.
you got some
I got some
finance background. Yeah. there
and
you
I took
go.
the Canadian Securities course.
Okay, so there you go.
So I've found that fascinating. Years and years and years of managing my own money and investing.
Sure.
And then about being smart as a consumer in terms of how do you buy things smarter. It's not about clipping coupons. It's not about credit card rewards. It's about none of those things. It's about all the different transactions that you do across every aspect of your life. And what's the clever way of doing those things to free up some money to invest and save or pay down debt if that's your situation.
It's about thinking about what it is you're doing. And now, of course, not all of these things would be obvious to people, so it's really nice that you have it all in this book. Now, you wouldn't have thought of this stuff immediately as you kind of built these ideas in your head as you were going, and then there was like a trigger for the book. Somebody mentioned something to you about you're wasting money or possibly saving.
Yeah, I mean, it all started, I had no idea I was even going to write the book. I knew there was a huge need for this book because all the personal finance books, including Wealthy Barber, they all start with the premise about saving 10%. Nobody gives you the part about, well, hang on, whoa, how do I free up
Where do I get it?
Where do I get the 10%?
Where does the 10% come from?
Cashflow Cookbook is the only one that I've ever seen that actually answers that question.
Excellent.
And that was Rob Carrick from the Globe. That was his comment on the book. He says, this is new, right? So where the book started, I was just driving to an event with a good friend of mine, Peter, and he plucked a car wash receipt out of the console of my car for $13.
Yeah.
And he said, why would you spend money on a car wash? And I thought, at the time I was an executive, a high-tech executive. I thought, well,
I can afford it.
Whatever. I mean, are you kidding me? $13?
I spent $13
anyway,
on
I
breakfast.
said, well, what are you recommending? And he said, you get he says, I go to Esso. He goes, I get the Esso rewards card. And then you present that. You put it in the machine after your credit card, and you save the points, and you fill in a form and get a car wash. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to do all that. That's ridiculous. And then a couple weeks later, someone was talking about this little Esso Speed Pass, the little keychain
really
dongle.
handy.
They're giving them a free plug here. And then I thought, well, that's interesting because it's actually easier to pay for your gas, and it automatically logs the points. I thought I'm in, so I got one. I was saving $25 a month on car washes. And I thought, well, why don't I just get one for my wife? And then there's 50. And then not long after that, I heard the radio ad for these, the monitoring center, these home alarm monitoring people, $10 a month. And I thought, well, I'm paying $35. So I called them up. I said, great, let's do it. I've had them monitoring my house for years now, and it works. We've had some false alarms. We've had the police here. There's not compromising anything. So now I'm up to $75 a month. And I thought, well, this is pretty interesting because these were no effort things. I didn't give up a single thing, but I'm $75 a month ahead. Now, $75 a month isn't really going to change a whole lot, but my engineering curiosity and my drive for efficiency and the MBA and everything kicked in. I thought, well, what else is there? And so that led me to a 2-year journey of building this massive spreadsheet where I said, what are the best hacks? What are the best ideas? Minimal sacrifice, minimal time to set it up that starts to free up money. So it started with a $75 a month idea. And the thing actually grew to total savings of ideas of about $13,000 of monthly savings ideas. Would you do all of them? Probably not.
No.
But I thought that's interesting, and if you apply everything, in the book I talk about a hearty serving, which is someone like me, married, kids, cell phones, cottage, all the rest of it. And if you implement everything in the book, and you invested that for 10 years, 7%, you have over $2 million.
Just for 10 years, right? Because people might start doing this early and
do it for 20 years, and it's about $6.7 million.
So there's a couple of things I like about this. Yeah. First is, you're going and doing an audit of your spending, which I think, if anything, this book will instigate. Everybody should do an audit. You should do an audit of everything that you do, right? So am I doing this the right way, or am I just doing it the way that somebody told me to do it? And what's the biggest savings item for you? Like the one that got up to the 13. Is there one that's a big chunk in that?
Yeah, there's so many.
There's all just little bits.
Yeah. So in the book, each chapter, each recipe in Cashflow Cookbook starts with a little vignette, and there's some fun characters. There's heroes, and there's heroines in the story, and there's detractors. And so those little opening stories have a one-time money-saving idea.
Okay.
And then the main idea of each recipe, it's all about how to chop down these recurring savings, because that's where the big things happen. So really interesting one-time savings idea was actually the same son, Connor, who's a great piano player. The vignette that's in there is a true story. This is a one-time savings thing. So he had this little cheap electronic keyboard, and he really wanted a proper piano, and my wife thought it should really get him a piano. Piano's, of course, not cheap.
I'm a piano player.
So so, $3,000-$4,000 for a nice piano.
Yeah, you were talking about an upright piano. Yeah. Yes.
Before you get into the grand piano.
Exactly, yeah.
And so I thought, okay, it's a lot of money, but, we found a reconditioned one really nice. I think we paid about $4,000, bought this piano. Now, what I didn't know at the time is that near the end of every month in Kijiji, you can find all kinds of pianos as nice as the one we have sitting right there, and they're free.
Yeah.
Because pianos are big and they're awkward, and when people move, they got to move, and good luck getting rid of them.
It's so hard to move a piano. I helped my friend move his upright because it's his grandma's piano, and he wanted to keep it in the family. Yeah. And to get it to the new place, they had to get a crane.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
A crane.
A crane.
And so, of course, a lot of people might be like, sorry, Grandma, I'm not going to use the crane. Somebody else will come and get it, and take it off our hands. And so, did you actually then end up doing that?
So, no, we bought the one you see sitting right over there.
You have the one there.
Now, when we downsize, we'll probably end up giving that piano away because you can't sell a used piano. Now I got smarter.
So many.
That's it. I got smarter. So when I learned this lesson. It's in the book. One of the little one-time vignettes. And so more recently, when I bought a electric guitar, Fender Stratocaster, it would have been $2,500 to get it out of a music store. Kijiji, you can have your pick. As I talk about in the book, you can set up a Kijiji alert for exactly the one that you want. Perfect. I wanted a Sienna finish, American Standard Stratocaster, maple neck, and I just waited. Up pops the email. Hey, here's one right here.
Wow.
So I spent $1,000 instead of $2,500. So that's a one-time savings things.
And this is not for anything urgent, right? This is the best part. And so if it's not something urgent, set up your alerts. Yeah, do it for flights too. I mean, do you have flights in there as well?
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's all in.
I got a flight. I'm going to Australia. Flight alerts coming up. So there's that, but it also teaches you patience. I want that guitar now. oh, maybe I don't need it right now. Maybe I
Well,
don't
it doesn't
need
matter
it.
if I get the guitar in a week. I mean, it's
Yeah,
not a big
exactly.
deal. On the recurring savings, there's so many that are really interesting. I mean, one was one that we discovered when our boys were young. We had 2 kids and send them to daycare, and then you got to drive somewhere and all the rest of it. But you get a nanny. Nanny's pretty expensive. Talking to my neighbors across the street, we said, why don't we just split a nanny?
Okay.
So we jointly hired a nanny. We paid her more than we would have as an individual nanny. And she, looked after their kids for a couple of weeks. Then she'd move over to our house. So
All right.
she had 3 or 4 kids at a time, moved from house to house. She was out earning her nanny peers. It was dramatically cheaper than us paying for our own nanny. So when you think about something like that, now you're starting to get into, some significant benefits. We talked about that one. That was saving about $1,000 a month.
Sure. Yeah.
So
these things are expensive.
It's there's an easy saving. So what's that worth? You think about over 10 years, it's $170,000.
Wow.
And over 20 years, $515,000. So that one switch is more than many people retire on.
That's amazing.
And you wouldn't think about it. You think, I got a couple of kids, I need a nanny.
Now, what I'm noticing is a lot of this stuff involves, first of all, talking to other people and talking to them about your money. And I think that might be a barrier for a lot of people. Like, first of all, I'm embarrassed that I spend so much, or I want you to know how much I make. Why do you think we still have this stigma? Like, what is it about talking about money that people have made it so shameful to, oh, I'm doing the wrong thing, or you're spending too much? Like, when your friend said that to you about the SO car wash, you were like, whatever, I can buy car washes, like screw you almost, right? But you know what? Maybe right away that was your reaction, like, I'm good, and then you thought about it.
Well, and you know what? I think the reaction's right, because if I save $25 a month on a car wash, that's not really going to have a big impact, even if I do it for 50 years.
Not thinking about it.
But that's just one thing.
Yeah.
And so when you start to think about all these other things, I was talking to somebody the other day about the whole storage lockers. And you see these storage lockers popping up everywhere, and they keep getting more and more elaborate. So if you think about it from the side of an investor, love to invest in the storage lockers. Now I think about it from the side of a consumer, and you think what typically happens, how do you get a storage locker? People get divorced, or they downsize a house, so they've got all this stuff, and you're emotionally invested in the stuff. And so you can't just give it away, of course, because it's your stuff. So you put it in a storage locker, you're spending $300, $400, $500 a month on the storage locker. Now, here's a different perspective. If you've ever tried to clear out a house, if you've had a parent die, you literally can't give away all of this priceless furniture. You have to pay. I had to pay someone to take away.
We had an auction for my grandparents' stuff. We sold a couch for $6. I mean, it was like the worst. It was kind of the worst because my grandparents, they had this stuff for years, and so what do people do instead? You just forget the storage locker.
I think you sell the stuff off in Kijiji, and you know what? If it didn't work in your old house and you've downsized, you don't have a place for it, and it's probably not going to work in the place after that either, because the styles are going to change or the color scheme will be different. So people spending this month after month in a storage locker, I think is ludicrous.
This is the basement thing, right? All of this stuff in the storage locker. If you have a basement, it's down there.
Yep.
And I think people should do an audit of that stuff way more often, because maybe you keep your current house because you think, well, I got all this stuff in the basement.
Right.
Where am I going to put it?
Right.
And it turns out that all the stuff that you really want to keep, say, maybe it's photos, but maybe you can even digitize those photos. But maybe, let's say you just like the paper photos. There's probably a couple of boxes there.
Yep.
And what else are we talking about? Heirlooms passed down, things like that. These are usually small things. Like, nobody passes down a couch. Really, I mean, this is my great-grandfather's. Now, of course, my wife refinished her great-grandparents' table, which is amazing, and that kind of made it our way. But those are the kind of things you can display in your house, and you're not going to put those away. So if you're not going to use it, is that kind of a lot of the theme in the book? If you don't use it, lose it?
You know what? It goes right across the board. In Cashflow Cookbook, I took a look at everything from household expenses to lifestyle to food and drink to financial.
Yeah, what are some? What's a good financial one? Like in terms of, are you talking about bank fees or mutual funds?
All of that, the whole bit. So one of the ones that's pretty interesting, I think something like 2/3 of the people who sign up for a mortgage get mortgage life insurance from their bank.
Yeah, that one.
Of course, the banks love it because it's a terrific margin product. It's one of the ones that we talk about in Cashflow Cookbook. So With the mortgage life insurance, if you compare to the cost of getting the equivalent amount of term life insurance, let's say you borrow $500,000. So the bank will say to you, geez, you want to protect that because your non-working spouse here won't be able to make the payments if you die.
That's right.
And that premise is correct.
Sure.
So you definitely want to protect against that. But the bank will quote you a number which will seem very, very small relative to the cost of the monthly mortgage payments. And the very strong temptation is, yes, dear, we need to do that. So you sign up.
You're in the room with the bank manager.
Away you go.
You're like, well, of course, I'll take it, right? You just don't want to think about it.
Right. But here's the part that doesn't get talked about. It can be 3, 4, 5, or 6 times more expensive than going to get a term life policy from a life insurance company for that same $500,000. So right away there's a savings there, which I'll come back to the savings in a minute. But the other thing is, if you get the term life policy, you're insuring yourself for $500,000 of coverage, in addition to whatever other
policies
you
buying an amount,
have.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Now, with the mortgage life insurance, you're insuring the mortgage, which starts at $500,000, but you're going to pay the same premium, which are 3, 4, 5, 6 times more than term life insurance, on your very last mortgage payment, which might mean you have a balance of $1,000.
Seriously?
That's how it works.
That's terrible.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound like the banks. I'm not a huge fan of the banks and their products.
Yeah.
I used to think that they were there to help me.
Yeah.
And turns out they're just like another company trying to make profits.
Well, and absolutely nothing wrong with that. They provide lots of value.
That's what they do, as long as we know that.
Right, as long as you know, there's a better way of doing that, which I would argue is with term life insurance much cheaper. So something like that is the sort of thing where you might be able to save $60, $100 a month, $200 a month, and then right away, my view would be right away, don't look at the money, don't go to the mall. Right away, you lock that into your TFSA payments, if that's the right thing for your RSP payments, your RESP, or some other, or if you need to pay down debt, put that right to your consolidated debts if you're coming out of bankruptcy, whatever the case may be.
Sounds like that's the key to Cashflow Cookbook. If you saving money, but then you go and buy donuts with it,
absolutely,
that's not you're not going to get your $2 million in 10 years. You gotta just to skip to that for a second. Where would you invest this money? So where you've been investing for a while, I'm guessing, over the years.
Yeah.
What's your personal policy? Where does your money go?
Yeah.
And how did you learn about it first of all?
Yeah. So now I assume you're talking about what to invest in as opposed to what vehicle, TFSA.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, we can talk about
that's a separate
thing in terms of like what's the most tax efficient place to put your stuff. I mean, generally try to max those things out. But I'm just thinking, how did you know what to invest in when you started, and who taught you, and how did you learn?
Yeah. Great. So, in addition to reading a lot of personal finance books, The Wealthy Barber and Richest Man of Babylon,
I forgot you took that.
Took the Canadian Securities course. So I've always been this sounds a bit weird, an avid reader of annual reports, quarterly reports, company research, a lot of these kinds of things. So my approach, and you have to look at your personal situation. I mean, it might be smart if you've got a lot of debt. I don't think you want to invest in anything. You need to pay that debt down.
I think that's a
guaranteed
great idea.
return. So let's assume you're out of debt, and depending on what age and stage you're at, and how soon do you need the money. So if the money is a long-term thing, then I think it makes sense to invest in equities, meaning stocks.
Yeah.
If you need the money for a house down payment because you want to buy a house in 2 years, you don't want it in the market.
Just
you want
leave
it in
that
GICs,
in
cash,
or something that you can pull out within a certain amount of time.
In terms of equities, I think what people miss is they miss these massive trends and changes that are coming. I shake my head when I see these analysts say, it might be time to rotate out of tech into consumer discretionary. To me, that's lunacy. No one's rotating out of technology. Technology is building these massive shifts. They're not going away. The trend to internet shopping and e-commerce, it's not going away. The trend to AI, it's not going away. All of these things are massive, and they're just going to keep going because the power of them is phenomenal.
But you know this stuff because you're in the tech business.
Right.
Is this like, how do we, if we're not in it like you, or we don't understand, who do we trust?
Yeah, so I think, I'll tell you one of the Bibles that I follow, and this, it may be a little overwhelming for some, but Mary Meeker, who's an analyst in the U.S., she puts out her Internet Trends report every year. It comes out the 1st of June every year. This is not for the faint of heart, but this is just one example. It's about a 250-page PowerPoint deck.
Wow.
But it's an example of the kind of thing to read to understand. She has no bias. She doesn't work for anybody, but she talks about each of these major trends. What's happening with artificial intelligence? What companies are playing in it? Who's going to be affected? What's going to shift? So reading these kinds of things, the McKinsey Quarterly, you can get the app for free on your iPad, and it talks about all these different things that are happening, what's happening in technology. So here's an example. If you think about what you do with Siri on your iPhone or Alexa or whoever you use, and the power of what they're able to do. So I don't have an executive assistant. As I work on Cashflow Cookbook, I do everything with Siri.
Okay, so you're talking to Siri
all the time,
asking stuff.
Make a note of this, call so-and-so, remind me to follow up with Bo next week, whatever. But you think about the complexity of things she can handle. Now think about what you're doing with a call center. So how far apart do you think Siri and Alexa are from a call center agent?
So we're calling in and speaking to like the robot voice in the call center.
I think that's it. We're knocking on the door. If you've seen what Google's doing with it, if you think about the power of Siri, so you think about a Siri for business and Alexa for business. Now, what does that mean? So the company's providing that. This is going to take off. There's no question about it. Fully burdened call center agents, $70,000 a year. You had 8,000 of them. You could put $500 million to the bottom line.
Sure.
Now, horrible disruption in the labor force.
Of course, and
not advocating.
Hopefully, people are seeing this coming now.
You got to prepare. It's a reality, right?
Yeah.
Huge impact. Lots of social challenges that come with it. Just from the business perspective, though, I look at it and I say, okay, companies with large call centers are about to have this massive windfall. Now, they're not going to see all of the call center agents go away or move into other roles, but there's going to be a big transformation that's going to happen. So that's just one example of things that are happening. If I go back 5 years ago, 6 years ago, started thinking about e-commerce, and no question Amazon coming on strong. Now, is Amazon going to be the winner? Is somebody else going to be the winner? I didn't know back then, but what I knew is there's going to be a lot of boxes moving around. So who moves boxes? FedEx and UPS.
I see.
So you want to be that bridge keeper, the toll keeper. So, and that's played out really well, right? You've got increasing violent weather, right, happening all around the world. Who plays there? So a company called Oriented Strand Board started buying them as you can see this global warming. And so as you have to rebuild after hurricanes, you need chipboard, Oriented Strand Board. You look at the TV news.
This was all speculation on your part.
Yeah.
But based on educated.
Well, speculation, but built on very powerful trends that you can see are going to happen. So, and the information about all of these shifts and what's happening, it's all out there. But what I would recommend is know these shifts and think about any company you're interested in investing or something that someone else is recommending. But then you got to run it through this filter that says, hey, is this thing going to get sideswiped by a bad trend, or is it on trend? So would I invest in, most retailers? I would tend to avoid them because I think the crystal ball looks a little hazy. How's that going to work?
Okay, yeah.
But I invest in, shopping center companies. I don't. Not comfortable.
Kind of the
Are they
obvious.
going to go away? No.
Yeah.
But I think there's definitely a move where, no question,
they're not going to explode. They're not going to get much bigger.
Yeah.
And so this is, this sounds like it's a bit more advanced for someone who is, first of all, if you like doing the research, right, and you want to get involved, and if you do have the idea that you want to choose your stocks and maybe do some value investing or whatever it may be, then do the research. You're giving a really good example of I am interested in this and I'm gaining knowledge so that I can do this correctly. But if you're not there, I wouldn't say just go ahead and
get a financial advisor.
Get an advisor.
I think for many people, you need that discipline to stay with something. So if you're doing it on your own, stock market drops by 10%. What are you going to do now? Are you going to sell everything?
No.
Are you going to have the fortitude to care, or are you going to double down and buy more?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's different.
It's hard.
Everybody's
different,
right?
And it's hard. So I think for many people, they need a really good financial advisor. There's other ways of doing it in terms of a basket of exchange-traded funds.
Yes, and what you were talking about in terms of what the future, I just had Raj Lala from Evolve ETFs on the show, and they're doing thematic ETFs. So if you're talking about auto innovation, if you like that as the future, well, you can take a more balanced approach to it by buying shares at an ETF, as opposed to feeling you have to pick the right companies, right? So there's that, and then of course there's just more generalized market-based ETFs, index funds, and that kind of thing. Yeah, it's it's not everybody is cut out for this, right? No. And Carl Richards says financial advisor is the person between you and stupid, right?
Yeah, I've heard that one.
And even if even for yourself, right? You even though you're very knowledgeable, there are emotions at play.
Yeah.
And like you said, the financial advisor can help, or just somebody. Like I'm a personal finance coach. It's accountability. It's someone to bounce ideas off and say, is this ridiculous? Or does this make sense for what I told you my goals are?
Yep.
Like, or am I gonna get there, right? And can I actually get 20% return? Somebody told me I could get this guaranteed. Is this this is not possible? So when you talk about the cash flow cookbook items, you pick 7% return over 10 years, and why would you pick that? Because you think that's achievable for anyone who's doing a balanced portfolio?
Yeah, so the whole premise, Cash Flow Cookbook, it's about these 60 really interesting ways of saving on recurring expenses. And in the book, to help people understand why that's so powerful, these recurring expenses, I talked about, hey, what's it worth to you in 10 years? What's it worth to you in 20 years? If you don't like my assumptions, there's worksheets in the book, very simple.
Sure, you can
put in your own assumptions,
and then
you see what it's worth to you.
Yeah, nice.
Then you get to the issue of, hey, what's the right percent to put it in? Well, if you're coming out of debt, and if you have a lot of credit card debt, and you're paying 20 or 22% or whatever, the
Terrible.
7% is crazy conservative. And if you can pay down that debt faster, you can triple or more the numbers that are in the book.
Hopefully you don't have that much debt.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Now, if the case is, hey, can I really make 7% investing? I absolutely believe that you can. I think that's very doable. In fact, if you look at the track record of the stock market over the last 20 years, what's it been doing? About 7%.
And even going back, I think I had in a blog post, I have a stat from 1950 to 2009.
Probably 7 or 8%.
7%, exactly. And that's, but that's in hindsight. How do we know that it's going to keep going like that?
You don't. And that's the fun of it. But you know what? Yeah, I think you have to have some faith on it. And the people who, after 1930 and people got wiped out, the people who became incredibly wealthy are people who went back in 1929 in the stock market crash, and they bought up everything they could find.
Probably the same thing in 2010 or 2009 if it wasn't still going down at that point. Yeah.
Same thing that happened, right? I think it's about staying with it. It's about consistent investment, and it's about finding that incremental money to keep investing every month, putting money aside every month. And if you get a raise, great. That's that much more money to be investing and putting aside. Why do you want to do that? You want to do it so you harness the power of compound growth, and you want to do it so you have financial freedom. It's a great day today. We're out here on a deck having a podcast, having some fun.
It's like the middle of it's a work day.
It's a work
for
day.
Everybody else.
Right. But there's no commute, we're out here enjoying the sunshine. And that's why you want to do it, because you want to get to that financial freedom.
That's
Does
right.
it mean you're going to sit on the beach all day? No, you can do all kinds of things, but you do it on your own terms, and your money's working for you. And I think that's a great place of happiness.
Just to take my example, I'm not at the financial independence level, because I'm 30. I'll be 38 in September, right?
Yep.
It's my 38th year, and but I have the financial freedom right now because I saved up enough so that I could take some time to myself to work on these things that I've always wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
To be creative. And I'm only able to do this because I can afford it without it even touching my retirement savings, which is great, right? Yeah. So it's like you can work hard for a bit, and you don't have to be like ready to retire. You can just now have freedom to do the things and not be like dependent on this paycheck. And the stat about millennials or even other Canadians of different ages being one paycheck away from not being able to pay their mortgage. If they got fired today and they couldn't find a job for a couple of weeks, that's ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, I think it's about getting away from that state of being hemmed in, where the paychecks come in, whoops, before you can get your hand on it, it's gone to pay for this, that, and the other thing. And so the whole idea of Cash Flow Cookbook is, hey, hang on, let's just take a look at these recurring expenses. How do you prune them down with clever ways without having to sacrifice, without a lot of effort, and you carry on with your life, but you pry out more of these funds to build for your future?
Because that is what people think, right? They think that Cash Flow Cookbook, I'm going to have to give up this or that. And David Bach gets a lot of flack for the latte factor.
Yep.
And also, speaking of the rates we were talking about, he uses 10%, and he gets a lot of flack for that too. He's like, nobody's going to get 10%, David. And this is Automatic Millionaire is his book, and I saw him speak in October in Dallas. And he clarified that it's not about lattes. It's, I just use it as an example, and 10% is just an idea. Like like you said, put your own rate in the spreadsheet. You don't have to give up anything. It's just showing you how, just like you're doing, how like changing one little thing can add up over time, but the multitude of things, right? Over time. And so you have the financial section. We talked about that a little bit. We talked about saving on things that you can pay for with rewards. Is that do you have other things like that?
There's a bit on that. Let me go back to the latte one because it's fun.
Please,
and there's all this controversy about I don't want to give up my latte. Very funny story. It's not in the book, but there was a woman I worked with. This will start like the usual story, but it's got a really interesting twist in it. There's a woman I worked with, and I was in a lot of meetings with her, and I'm going to guess she was earning maybe $60,000, $70,000 a year. And it'd be in a morning meeting with her, and she'd have the big, Starbucks, Vente, Grande, whatever it was. Probably, let's call it $6.
Sure.
And then later in the day, she'd have another one, right? And they kind of go, oh, that's interesting. And then every afternoon, she'd have a Coke and a bag of chips of some sort, right?
Wow.
And I thought it was just one day, and then I realized that was her pattern. I started watching her, and I realized that's what she was doing. And so you can say, no, I really like to have my fancy coffee, and no problem with that. But what blew me away was what was in the lunchroom of this company. And what was there was this beautiful stainless steel coffee machine with the bean grinder on top, and you could select the roast and the beans or whatever. Yeah. And here's the kicker. It was a Starbucks machine, okay? And that's what I drank.
Yeah.
All right? So I just put my cup in, I drink it right out of the machine. Now, this is not a cheesy machine. It's a beautiful Starbucks machine. The coffee was terrific. I would challenge her. I didn't do it, but I wanted to challenge her to a taste test of the $12 a day she was spending on coffee versus the stuff that comes out of the machine. And then, when you think about the Coke and chips, I won't even get into the nutritional...
We could have a whole diet
that's another
conversation
whole thing.
Here, but
if you had to have Coke and chips, I'd go to Costco, get a big case of it, and a case of chips, terrific savings. So, if you do the math on what is going on there, if you work it, it's about $300 a month. Talking to a friend of mine who owns a Midland Honda, and he says, $300 a month. He says, I could lease her a Civic for that. So here she's doing something which they give you the free stuff anyway. There's nothing to be giving up here. She could be in a Civic. Now, what's interesting is if you do the math on the $300 a month, if you push that out for 20 years, you get $151,000. Now, with $151 and some other investors, she might be able to buy a Honda dealership. Yeah. Okay? With some debt. Or I bet you she could do that in 30 or 40 years.
I think I just interviewed a guy who could help her get into real estate.
Probably. But that's a really significant amount of money. And it'd be really interesting to look at the rest of her entries in her checking account. Where else is the money going?
And I don't know if you want to get into the psychology behind all this, but it's, what I've realized is a lot of people need these things, or the ritual, the routine, in order to compensate for the fact that they're working at 9 to 5s that they don't necessarily like that much.
Yep.
And so if you ask them to switch this up, it's like you're taking away their pleasures, well, in one way, but they're kind of unhappy in the first place. Yep. And that's why they're spending. Is there anything, what do we do about this epidemic?
I did a blog post on this very thing, the Cashflow Cookbook, and this whole thing, The Power of Habit. And there's been books written on it. There is a book by that title, for sure. And it's incredible. And I remember I worked with someone once, and he said to me, 30 days makes a habit. Okay. And take anything that you do in your life. So whether it's exercise, right? I mean, that business of going out for a run, it's kind of hard to get out there. But if you do it consistently, once you start to do it, then the thing you miss is not running.
Absolutely. Right? I need to run every couple of days.
Right.
I got to do it.
I did the same thing. Biking, running, going to the gym, something. It becomes this positive addiction. So in that particular case, that coffee, if she took a moment and actually looked at this business of $300 a month, I think it would be a bit of a game changer if she did a taste test on it. So you need all of these things, but we've been primed to think there's a multi-million-dollar industry out there getting us to buy things, getting us to think that we need, you can't be driving an old minivan, you need to be driving a car that makes a bit of a statement. And so all of this stuff builds up. Well, it's no surprise that we have a hard time battling against that because the brilliant people who know the psychology and the messaging and the photography and the airbrushing and everything else getting us to buy all of these things. Now, if you can break out of that and think it through a little bit smarter, you're in a different kind of a world.
I come from a background of a long gambling addiction. I know how hard it is to get out of an addiction, and so I think I think the most that we can do is talk about it. I mean, I know that I can't sit in a room with people who actually want to recover from an addiction and say anything to them that will help. I've tried. I've tried saying, like, I'm like, hey, I've been through that, I've been through all these stages. Here's what you do. Doesn't work. Right? But if we just keep talking about it, writing your book as you did, having these conversations, I think people then pick up on, we're going to make the consumerism and the overspending hopefully less of the norm, or at least make a louder voice about the it's okay to not be like the Joneses. It's okay to miss out on this or that. You're not going to be chastised by the world.
Well, and it's funny because when you talk to people who are in the personal finance world, I had lunch with Rob Brown from Wealthing Like Rabbits, great guy, and he mentioned he's driving a 2008 Honda.
Great,
right? And Doug Hoyes
doesn't surprise
me. Doug Hoyes, who you know, Debt Free in 30 in his podcast.
Yeah,
and he says, I drive a Honda, right? I drive a Honda.
I got a 2010 Mazda. It's out there,
right?
Yeah.
And if you think about, it's interesting. It was on with Wolfgang Klein, who's I think an SVP at Canaccord. And he's got a great podcast. He calls himself the Wolf of Bay Street. Fantastic guy.
Yeah, okay.
He's driving a 13-year-old car. And he says, I don't care. He says, I've never made money on cars, right?
Yeah.
And so, but when you're young, you think, I got to have what are my friends going to think about your car? It doesn't matter what your friends think about your car. You want to be in a situation where you're doing what you want to do when you're in your 30s or your 40s or your 50s, and you're not grinding it into this monthly paycheck.
It is a theme. Paycheck. It's a theme of people who either built wealth earlier or who understand how to do it now. It's just point A to point B, the car. As long as it works, you want to consider things like safety, that kind of stuff. You don't want to be driving something across the country that's going to break down every 2 seconds. Is that one of the things buying a used car? Do you talk about that?
Yeah, I think that's in there. There's a lot of recipes in there.
Of course.
But all of these things, there's smarter ways of doing it. They give me an interesting one in transportation. I was working downtown, and strangely, the company didn't pay my parking, but whatever. Every company has their own thing.
Yeah,
weird.
Sure.
And so I parked underneath the building, right? Nothing to that. $31 a day downtown Toronto.
Terrible stuff.
And, you count out $31, so comes the card every day, you do your thing. And then a woman I worked with said, I saw you parking under the building. And I go, yeah. And she goes, why would you do that? And I thought, what do you do? And she goes, well, I just park kitty corner 100 yards away. There's a grocery store. If you're in before 9 and out, at 6 or whatever, it's $20 a day.
Okay.
And I thought, that's interesting. So there's, $11. Then I found a website, bestparking.com.
Yes.
And it actually shows, have you seen that? It shows you the map.
Oh, I use it whenever I'm going downtown.
It's brilliant. Yeah. And all the parking all around there, you can look at the daily or the monthly rates. So if you're paying to park monthly or daily, whatever it is you're doing, have a peek at this. If you're doing it habitually, you find a place that's cheaper and you're going to walk 100 yards, right?
I use the Rover app.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's like the Uber of parking.
Uh-huh.
And I'll go somewhere downtown where it's $30 a day, and it's like 75 cents an hour because it's nobody's using their driveway. Like if I go to Kensington, you can just park, and they have the little Rover sign on the side of the building. It's really, I'm really hoping these things are more prevalent in the future because, it's in urban environments like this, you get killed by parking, and it's almost not worth it. Like, I'm happy that I didn't have to pay to park on your street. Hopefully
we'll find out.
We'll find out later when I get a ticket.
Yeah, you don't.
But, exactly. But, the GO train, it'll cost me just under $11 each way. So if I know I'm going to have to go somewhere downtown and pay parking for, say, even the day, or even for a couple of hours, the GO train is actually the better bet. Not including the environmental savings that I'm putting in. So it's about considering these things, right? Like, I intentionally know how much the GO train is going to cost me, and I know that it sometimes might be cheaper to take the car, so I just have those thoughts.
Right.
Just as long as that's always kind of going through in your head.
That's the difference. A lot of people, they don't have those thoughts, They need to park, well, they just park right underneath the building, right? They need a coffee, they go buy one. So it's about getting a little bit smarter, and, could you curate all of this stuff yourself? You could. I spent 2 years gathering up all the ideas for Cashflow Cookbook. They're in there.
You did
so
the work
run
for
through,
us.
you do the checklist, and see what you need to tune up.
And so, yeah, like you said, not everything in the book is going to apply to everyone. Of course, different stages of life and different life situations. But with 60 recipes in there, you're going to find something. Like I said, I listened and I did the ESSO thing right away.
Yep.
And I'm still waiting for my car to come in. But,
okay.
But I did buy ESSO today.
Yep.
And they're even adding PC Optimum points actually in the summer. So that I'm already that, which is great. It's like, take advantage of things. Do you talk about credit cards at all and credit card rewards?
You know what, I do, but I find a lot of personal finance writers, they obsess over which is the best credit card reward points. If you do the math on it, I mean, a typical reward is about 1.75%. So if you're spending $5,000 in a month, you're getting $75 of rewards.
Okay.
If and only if you pay the credit card off in full every month.
Which you should do all the time.
Of course, but lots of people don't.
No,
I mean, the
that's
stats
true.
say that they don't, in which case you don't get the $75 reward and you're paying some exorbitant amount of interest. So I'd say on the credit card, the first thing to do is to say, well, how much do you actually spend in a month? And if the answer is $1,000 or $2,000, you're maybe talking about $20 of monthly reward. And what's the difference going to be from credit card A to credit card B? Not a lot.
Yeah.
So, is it worth a look? Yeah, but I think that whole credit card rewards and coupon clipping, those are the smallest things, and they're fairly high effort. There's much easier ones.
Right, because people do go there first. And, get your rewards, you get free money. And it's true, you do get free money if you follow the rules. But you're right, it's not as free money as changing one tiny thing that you do.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to go buy... it's the it's the penny wise and pound foolish concept, isn't it?
Totally.
And I feel like that's a huge theme in your book. Is everybody focusing on things that we think are the big savers?
Yep.
But
and there's things all over the place. I mean, if you look out back here, you've got a fairly lengthy driveway which I share with a neighbor, and we used to pay snow clearing a plow guy to come and plow. It was about $700 each household for the year.
Okay.
And the problem is they come after you've already tried to plow your way out to go to work. They show up at 9 o'clock.
Exactly.
And of course, they get busy when there's a lot of snow, but that's when you need them there. So Peter, my neighbor, and I, why don't we just buy a snowblower, which we did. And of course, we bought it in June. At Home Depot,
smart.
which is where you get it.
Because you're planning, you're always thinking
We got the
about
$1,350 snowblower for $800, and we split it, so it's $400 each. We've had the thing now for about 5 years. Each of us probably does 3 plowings. It takes about 40 minutes. So 40 minutes for each of us, 3 times a season. 2 of us, that's a total of 6 times. And it costs literally nothing. I mean, I don't think we'd use $3 of gas in a season of snow blowing. So there's a simple example. Yeah, that one is a little bit more work, but we actually get the thing plowed. One of us will get up early. We split even and odd days, and it's done.
I feel like I'm going to come back and there's going to be a bunch of rover signs along your driveway. Just maximizing.
I don't know about that. I'm more interested to try rover when I'm parking somewhere.
But people can make a lot of money, and it's things like that. If you realize you have a resource like a parking spot, well, now there are things like, I mean, if you have a car, you can make money doing Uber. I mean, there's other things involved in it, but there's a lot of ways. The 2 ways to save or pay down debt or whatever is either make more money or cut down your expenses. And so you're focusing on cutting down the expenses. It's often hard to make more money, and when people do, they spend it. They just spend more money.
Well, whatever you do, I mean, there is one piece in here. It's interesting in Canada, where the tax system works is you can earn $10,000 tax free. So, what I would say is in many cases, you've got one spouse working, the other one who is at home or at home looking after the kids. But, hey, is there some sort of little side business, whether it's a bit of dog walking or whatever, because it's tax-free? So if you could earn that $10,000 tax-free in some sort of a side hustle, whatever it is, putting $10,000 a year into debt repayment or $10,000 a year of incremental investment, that's pretty material. That makes a big difference. And the fact that you can do it without paying taxes in Canada is fabulous.
That's great. And then I would go further to say get a whole bunch of dividend income so you don't have to pay any taxes at all.
Oh, yeah.
If that's all you make. But that's another podcast.
Yeah.
So Cashflow Cookbook, cashflowcookbook.com.
Cashflowcookbook.com. You can go on there, you can subscribe. You get all the blog posts, which is all free, and it's incremental content to what's actually in Cashflow Cookbook, the book.
And you're going to keep up with this. This is your main focus right now.
100%. It's the focus. So the book itself, you can get the book on cashflowcookbook.com, and it's also available at amazon.ca.
Perfect. It's really great to have. You don't have to read it cover to cover. just like any recipe book, you're not going to go in and do all the recipes from start to finish, right?
Well, that's the idea. You don't have to grind through some boring anecdote and story. You can go in and say, hey, I want to take a look at my transportation expenses. You flip through. You don't own a car? Great. You skip the ones that relate to a car. You take a look at lifestyle. There's things that aren't applicable to you. You don't have to read it. But could you find the value for the $20 of the book? I guarantee you can find the value in them.
Just as a final note, if someone were to go, if you could tell someone, just go do this one simple thing right now, I mean, other than the SO extra card that we've talked about, give SO a lot of press, what would you tell someone to do that wouldn't take very long, that might save them a couple of bucks a month?
Oh, there's so many different ones to take a look at. Depends so much on their circumstance. One that was probably the most interesting one to me is clothing.
Okay.
And the stat that I found fascinating is that we only ever wear, on average, 20% of the clothing that we buy.
I totally agree with that.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it makes sense, because when you go into your closet every day, you don't say, hey, let me get my dowdiest clothes to wear. You say, hey, what's the one I'd look the best in today? Yeah. And so you keep working these favorites all the time, and the other 80% languishes until the springtime, at which point you sell it in your yard sale for 5 cents on the dollar.
Done.
So I think if there's one quick one to do, I would do an inventory of your closet and get the piece that you don't have that lets you wear more of your clothes. So you've got the brown belt that's been languishing because you don't have any brown shoes. Then go buy yourself a nice pair of brown shoes, so then you're going to use that brown belt. And when you buy a piece of clothing, buy the thing that you need, buy a good quality one, and take the time to make sure it fits. Because usually when you look in your closet, you go, oh, I could wear the blue shirt, but it's a little baggy on me. And, the gray pants, they're too tight, I'm not going to wear those. So take the time and really select your pieces, and don't go shopping for the sake of shopping. Go shopping when you need something. I'm a big fan of online, because that saves the parking and the gas and the hassle and everything else. And away you go. So that would be, clothing is worth a look. Seriously, I just got a suit from Indochino.
Okay.
Which is super clever. So they take all your measurements, you go to the mall once, and then if you want a shirt, you pick the fabric, and they've already got all your measurements. It's completely tuned to you. Everything's custom made, but it's not at that price point.
Yeah,
so,
but if you go into a bespoke place in the financial
clever way
district.
to buy.
Yeah. So do an audit of your clothing. Do an audit of your financial life. Just take it slow.
Yeah.
Just look at anything that you do, and I would give this advice to anybody. Look at anything that involves money in your life. Whether you're looking to change it or not, you might just have this little light bulb that comes up and says, yeah, I could do that. But the book is there to guide you along. So
well, you know what? Fine. And the idea is you look for these tweaks. You don't give up a great lifestyle, but you find these simple tweaks, and then right away you get it working for you, paying down debt or investing.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Gord. This was really good. Thanks for having me in your place.
Real pleasure. Thanks so much.
If you like this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It would mean a lot to me, and it only takes a few seconds. Don't forget to head over to BoHumphreys.com/giveaway and enter to win one of the 5 signed copies of Cashflow Cookbook. I watch Gord sign them all, so I can verify their authenticity. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Personal Finance Show. Next week is my Future of Payments episode, featuring Sam Mulligan from MobiWave, Chris Chan from Duello, Lawrence Cook from NanoPay, and Sue Whitney from Payments Canada.